first step is to remove the front wheels and tires, and then we're going to remove the caliper by removing this bolt as well as this bolt. And then remove the caliper. Remove the hardware from the tie rod ends on both sides, and then remove the tie rod ends. Remove the hardware securing the lower A-arm to the knuckle. Then remove the lower A-arm. Remove the cotter pin from the castle nut. Then remove the castle nut. Remove the hardware securing the upper A-arm to the knuckle. Then remove the knuckle. Remove the hardware securing the shock to the A-arm. Then remove the shock and tie it up out of the way, as well as the A-arm. Remove the axle. Remove the tie rod completely from only the passenger side. Remove the 4 bolts holding the differential to the machine. Now disconnect the steering shaft by removing this bolt. Remove the following bolts to remove the rack and pinion. Once you've removed all the hardware from your rack and pinion, you can go ahead and remove it from the machine. In order to get it out, you're going to have to twist it, turn it, move it around. It's a pretty tight fit. For the next step, you're going to need a measuring scale, and we're going to be centering the rack. You're going to want to adjust the rack back and forth until your measurement from the housing here to the face of the inner ball and socket. It looks like we're at 48. And then on this side, we're going to take our scale and stick it up inside of the housing, still measuring to the face of the inner ball and socket. And it looks like we're at 48. Our rack is centered, so we're going to take a paint marker. We're going to make sure that we mark the actual housing to the spline shaft here, where your steering shaft is going to go. So we're going to make a good blue mark, and then we're just going to run it right up through here. Make sure it's very visible. The customer that we're installing this rack and pinion for today decided that he did not want the steering stops. At this time, this is when you'd want to install them. All you're going to want to do is just take the steering stop and slide it over the shaft here, as well as this side. So now that we're not going to be installing the steering stops, we're going to go ahead and install our boots. The big side's going to go to the big side of the housing. Just going to want to slide it on. So it should look just like that. Do the same thing on this opposite side over here. Then you're going to want to take your zip ties. Place one here, as well as here on the opposite side. Now we're going to place a zip tie on the inner side of the boot here, towards the center of the housing. Now cut off all the excess zip ties. Take the provided nuts and install them to the inner ball and socket studs. And now we're ready to install the rack to the machine. When installing the rack and pinion, you want to make sure that the side with the 3 holes is facing towards the driver's side, and then the bracket with the 2 bolt holes is facing towards the passenger side. You're going to want to start feeding the rack and pinion through. You're going to have to wiggle it around, move it around. You may have to push the inner ball and sockets downward on both sides. Once the rack's in position, attach the steering shaft to the new rack. Push your pinch bolt through, then get your nut started onto the bolt. And then we're going to attach the rack and pinion to the frame of the machine using the provided hardware. The 3 bolt holes that are on the driver's side are going to use the long bolt, and then the 2 on the passenger side are going to use the shorter of the 2 bolts. So we're going to slide the rack into place, then go ahead and start our nut. We're going to do this for all 3 of the holes on the driver's side. Then we're going to move on over to the passenger side. Once you have all your bolts started, you're going to want to go through and fully tighten all 5 bolts securing the rack to the frame, and then make sure that you tighten your steering shaft pinch bolt as well. Reinstall everything except for the tie rods. Then we're going to install the heavy duty tie rods included in the rack and pinion kit. You want to make sure that the side that has this on it is going towards the outside of the machine, and then the side that has nothing is going to thread onto the inner ball and socket. You want to thread it up there until you have just a couple threads showing. And you're going to grab your provided outer tie rod in. You want to make sure that the nut's threaded all the way down. And go ahead and thread it into the tie rod here. Again, just leave a couple threads. You're going to have to make adjustments. And then you're going to grab your hardware. Depending on what year machine you're working on, it's going to depend on which hardware. If you have a 15 plus 1000, you're going to be using the hardware right here. If you have a 14 1000, you're going to use the bolt hardware here. So we're working on a 14 today. What you're going to want to do is pop your bushings, one on top, then one on the bottom. You're going to want to look at your rotor, get it as straight as you possibly can. We're going to have to come back and set the toe, but at this point you just want to get it as straight as you can. We're going to go ahead and thread this in a little bit till it lines up perfectly with the hole. Take your provided bolt, get it lined up with the knuckle. Drop it through. Take your castle nut. Go ahead and install it. And you want to go ahead and fully tighten this and then install your cotter pin. Reinstall your wheels and tires and then sit the machine back down on the ground. Before making any adjustments, make sure your rack is still centered and your mark is still lined up. For the next step, you're going to need somebody to help you because we're going to be setting the toe. So we're going to measure from the center seam of the tire on the passenger side as well as the driver's side. Whatever the measurement is, it looks like we got 56.5. So we're gonna do the exact same thing on the back side of the tire. And it looks like we're at 56.5 on the back side of the tire. So that means our toe's good to go. If you have to make any adjustments, the awesome thing about SuperATV's heavy duty tie rods is they're double adjustable. So all you'd have to do is grab a hold of the tie rod, spin it inward or outward depending on what you need to do to get your toe set, and make sure that your measurements are the same. Once we've got our measurements the same in the front of the tire and the rear, we're going to want to roll the machine back and forth to make sure that the suspension's settled. And then make sure after you've done this that the wheel is still straight. And you're going to want to make sure that your measurement is exactly the same as it was before we rolled the machine. Looks like we're at 56.5 in the front and 56.5 in the rear of the tire. So we're all good to go. The next step is going to be to go ahead and tighten all your jam nuts up. Hey, thanks, Corey. And that's how super easy it is to install SuperATV's heavy duty rack and pinion on this Polaris RZR 1000. For more information on this rack and pinion or any of SuperATV's great products, give us a call at 855-743-3427 or check us out online at superatv.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.